Hello, Fielders fans, and welcome to a very special episode of the official CGFC podcast, brought to you by our wonderful sponsors, our partner for 2020, Caulfield Grammar School, the Caulfield Grammarians Association, Hammond Floors, Dorman Capital, Matias Group, ALH Group, ProBuild, Scholten McKissock Wealth Management, Bendigo Bank East Malvern, Club Warehouse, Besser & Co., Grilled Elsternwick, Urban Alley Brewery, and the Royal Saxon Hotel. My name is Tommy Flanagan, and joining me tonight, as always, is the superstar from the CGFC senior men's team, Charlie Logan, and reserves coach / Melbourne Stars and Victorian cricket wicketkeeper, Seb Gotch. And fellas, we've had some big guests on the show in recent weeks, but tonight we go to another level again with the one and only Chris Judd joining us on the show in a few moments' time. How are we feeling, fellas?
Geez, Flanas, I am feeling unbelievably toey at the moment because, as we've known all week, Chris Judd is coming on the show. He was my biggest idol growing up, Seb.
Hence the shaved head.
Hence the shaved head. And just bursting out of packs, yelling Juddy. I won't get caught up. But Seb, it's been a big week of preparation. We're ready to go. I've done some research. We're feeling good. How are you?
I'm good. Probably haven't done as much research as you two.
Oh, you've done that?
You've done zero.
Yeah.
But I think that holds us in good stead going into this interview. It gives someone the ability to throw some random questions out and not be too scripted. But look, 3 big names in our first 4 reps.
Well, we had a few people saying early on that we weren't going to make it to episode 2.
Correct.
So not only have we surpassed that, Seb, but we've got the greatest footballer of all time on the podcast. It's going to be huge.
Can't wait.
So let's not keep him waiting any longer. On the other side of this short word from our sponsors, Chris Judd is on the official CGFC podcast. Don't go away.
This episode of the CGFC official podcast is brought to you by our sponsors, the Caulfield Grammarians Association, Hammond Floors, Dorman Capital, Matias Group, ALH Group, ProBuild, Scholten McKissock Wealth Management, Bendigo Bank East Malvern, Club Warehouse, Besser & Co., Grilled Elsternwick, Urban Alley Brewery, and the Royal Saxon Hotel.
You're simply the best, better than all the rest, better than anyone I've ever met. I'm stuck on your heart, I hang on every word you say, tear us apart.
Welcome back, Fields fans. Next up on the show, we have a very special guest on the official CGFC podcast, Caulfield royalty, the 279 game, 228 goal, 6-time All-Australian, 5-time club best and fairest winner, 2-time Lee Matthews Trophy winner, 2-time Brownlow medalist, 2006 Premiership captain for the West Coast Eagles, and former skipper of the Blues and class of 2001 Caulfield Grammar student, Chris Judd. Welcome to the show, mate. Awesome to have you here on the official CGFC podcast.
Thank you, Flanas, and a big honour to talk to you. Your reputation precedes you in school. I was finishing you about in the years above, so to finally meet, not quite in the flesh, but close to it, is a huge thrill. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you on, mate. Chris, with this coronavirus pandemic around recently and restrictions on leaving the house, how have you and Beck and the kids all been spending most of your time?
Well, I trade stocks for a living, so I've been able to do that from home, which is lucky. Some days when I've looked at how much money I'm losing on the screen, it hasn't felt that lucky. But to be able to keep your mind active in these times, particularly for me, it's just been a godsend. So that's been good. Beck's taken the lead role with the homeschooling, which has also been good for me, but that's been good for the kids as well because they've got someone smarter than them teaching. And and we've been sorting it out pretty well. The twins have actually gone through ELC throughout this whole time because it's classed as daycare, if you like. So they've been out of our hair, and yeah, we've survived. We're not getting divorced at this stage, and everyone's relatively happy. But it'll be good to have the kids back at school, no doubt.
Yeah, bloody oath. And now I'm sure you've tuned into the first 3 of our episodes, haven't you?
I have. A part of me was a little bit upset I wasn't your top priority. Obviously, you've sort of got the big names out of the way early, and you're sort of starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel, which has hurt a little bit.
It's a natural decline.
Yeah, I did manage to listen to the first 3 episodes, and you guys are doing a great job.
Yeah, so in saying that, you'll know that we ask the tough questions here on the CGFC podcast. And we'll throw you back to your school days to start off with. We want to know what were you like as a student? Were you a bit of a ladies' man? Were you a bit of a jock? Were you a bit of a bookworm, a bit of a nerd? How would you class yourself back at Caulfield?
I would sort of say I was probably like a white two-pack. Just
Just define that again for those unfamiliar.
Roaming the streets of Malvern and just cultivating a real bad boy image. No, I was sort of a mix. I loved my skateboarding growing up, and loved my rap music, but I love footy as well. So I sort of flip between various groups.
Interesting.
That's interesting. We had Dill Shield on last week, and we spoke to him about the fact that he was actually drafted before he finished VCE. So, in a sense, his future was already made up. Was there any part of you that wasn't looking down that football path going through school, or were you pretty set on being a future star?
Professional skateboarder.
A professional skateboarder. Yeah.
From the age of 15, I was super focused on playing AFL footy. And didn't spend a lot of time thinking about what was going to happen if that didn't pan out. Having said that, I didn't study overly hard from year 7 till 10, but did pull my finger out in the last couple of years and got a reasonable score. So I had some options to do some other things if footy didn't pan out. But yeah, and a lot of sportsmen are the same. I've got a fairly obsessive personality, and probably from about the age of 15, 16, I was pretty laser-like focused on playing AFL footy.
So what did that involve, that focus in your teenage years? Does that just mean that you trained in your own time very hard, or you watched a lot of footy, or you spoke to a lot of people? How does that, when you say you had laser focus on wanting to be in the AFL, what does that look like for a 15, 16-year-old
male? I had some interesting lessons early on in life. So I used to do little athletics as a kid, and I never really trained, little athletics as a 9 or 10-year-old. You train once or twice a week, the same as everybody, and that's what I did. And every year I'd get to the regionals for 800 metres, and I'd come sort of top couple, and then I'd find my way to the state championships, and I'd come sort of, call it 8th to. I'd usually make the final, but I'd be at the back end of the final. So call it sort of 6 to 8 without a heap of training. And leading into, I think it was under 11s, whenever it was, my man said, do you want to actually do some training for this? Sort of 6 weeks out of the state championships, actually 4 weeks out. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. So we trained every day for a month. And moral of the story is I ended up winning the state championships. And it was just a very simple lesson in doing more work than other people and getting a reward for that work. And it wasn't that lesson was at the forefront of my mind, but, those sort of things kept popping up throughout my childhood. And by 16 years of age, I was able to understand that people are generally pretty predictable. When you're running and you feel like you're going to throw up, people want to stop running. That's a natural reaction, and you can predict that that's what people will do. Even when you're a professional athlete, you know that people don't want to train on Christmas Day. Even a lot of professional athletes, once it starts raining or once there's lightning around, they won't want to train, even though these things are efficacious to performance. So it felt to me pretty simple that if you knew what most people weren't prepared to do and you knew what you needed to do to become better than other people, it felt like it was a pretty simple formula to get ahead. And it's probably around 16, those sort of things became really clear, and it really just looked like training a heap and training more than other people.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, because being better than other people is doing things that other people can't do. And we did a bit of research and came across some of your stats throughout your days at Caulfield Grammar, and we actually found 12 goals in the second half against Haileybury. Yeah. I'm not sure there are many people that can do that.
That's a fair effort. It's a fair effort.
Was that a good day?
That was a good day. I gave off a couple. It's probably a bit better than that. But I love school footy. I mean, school footy is the most fun, particularly my year 12 year. It's just the most enjoyable football I've ever played by a mile. About 6 Friday afternoon games where you come out and, the whole school will be first half. They were just magic. So, they were very, very fond memories.
Yeah, and we don't usually do a huge amount of research, but it's definitely gone up this week. We also might have found out that there was a particular game against St Kevin's as well. Flanas, you did a bit of groundwork on that one, didn't you?
Yeah, I spoke to Greg Meredith. He said it was just about his favourite game that he's ever coached for Caulfield. St Kevin's game involving there's a bit of a scuffle with a particular player from St Kevin's, and then you went on with some last quarter heroics.
Yeah, so I went to Ireland as an under-16 with the Australian team, and we had that under-16 almost single-handedly killed the Australian-Irish football experiment when
Relations.
there was accusations from some of the Australian players that they were getting their nuts grabbed by some of the Irish players. And at one stage there was an all-in brawl, but it included the benches running onto the field and getting in the brawl, which was real, just unparalleled stuff. I'd love to see some footage of it. Anyway, one of the main protagonists from that, the Irish captain, was Nick Walsh, who ended up on Melbourne's rookie list for a while. A really good guy, great Irish Gaelic football player. Anyway, that all happened when I was 16, and then in year 12, I started the game, and lo and behold, standing next to me was that same Irish captain. He'd been given a scholarship to Evans, and that same guy was tagging me, who he'd sort of punched on with a couple of years earlier. So that was, the poetic justice from it all was, he did a good job tagging me. It was a close game, and then late in the quarter, I went up for a mark, and he was running back with the flight, and I may have accidentally kicked him square in the nuts, and and it did feel poetic justice to that whole event. We won. It was a brilliant game. We won the game, by a couple of points. Yeah, that what, as Greg Meredith touched on, that would be my fondest school footy game if I could remember one too.
Yeah, it sounds like you not only did Caulfield proud, but you did the country proud there. So thanks on behalf of all of us for that one, for giving the Irish one. And just to wrap up your school time, didn't we in that same year lose to Xavier by a point, or how did that season end up?
Yeah, so we had a great team, and in the end, we didn't win the whole thing. We lost a game by Xavier to I think less than a goal. Xavier had a really good team. They had Luke Ball, Joe Watson, Andy Bowen, quite a lot of really good footy players. So they got the chocolates, and we missed out. But yeah, it still didn't really change the just how special that year of footy was from my perspective.
Just before we move on to AFL, just a couple of little quick ones about school, not school footy, but school itself. Did you have any favourite teachers when you were attending Caulfield?
Oh, who was? I love Mez. Greg Meredith. He mentioned. Who was my?
Shout out to Mez.
Peter Robson was his English teacher. He was a really good fella. Oh, I loved Katrina Ratner for Lit. She was good. The bloody PE teacher. He's
Mr. Sparks.
Sparksy, yeah, Sparksy. He was great.
Shout out to Sparksy.
Sparks is a really good man as well.
Yeah, he puts about half a tub of hair gel on his hair
Every single morning.
Slick back.
Yeah, it could not move. Yeah.
What about bench? I reckon he used to bench about 110, 120. It's a pretty solid bench for a punter.
Well, with the shoulders you got, I'm sure that anything over 50 kilograms is probably a good bench, isn't it?
Yep, that's a bar.
I automatically notice people's hair if they've got a good head of hair. But if anyone can bench more than the bar, I'm generally pretty impressed. So you get to 120, that's a big effort.
Yeah, that's huge. I don't know.
How about the tuck shop, Chris? Were there any items that you go for there at lunchtime?
You get tuck shop on the Fridays. I'd get the jam, the choc jam donut, which was a real favourite, real diabetes in a bag.
Yep.
And I can't remember what I'd get from a savoury perspective. I do remember the choc jam donuts was a treat on the Friday.
Yeah, I don't think I go to the tuck shop.
I did. I used to get those chicken strips that you can
Yeah,
get.
they're great with the sweet chili
Sweet
sauce.
chili sauce, yeah.
I was,
Yeah.
big on, I was big on the hot cheese roll. Love the hot cheese roll.
Yeah, you love those.
A few of them.
Yeah.
And just one more question about school. How much of a part do you think Caulfield Grammar played in shaping your development as a young person?
Yeah, a heap. I was really lucky to. I think one of the luckiest parts about going to a school like Caulfield, and there's obviously a lot of good schools around, was for me was being in a sport where being good at sport was something that was really celebrated. You see a lot of schools, where perhaps playing sport that isn't as valued or an integral part of the school program. So for me, I love my sport, and to be able to do it at a school like Caulfield with wonderful facilities and to be celebrated for doing it was hugely important to me.
You were captain of Vic Metro in your state champ year, and then you came through kind of famously in that draft, the super draft, as they like to call it, with Luke Hodge and Luke Ball. Talk to us about the dynamic between the three of you guys. Like, did you have a bit of a rivalry there early in your career because you were, so highly touted? And do you have a relationship now post footy?
It wasn't really a rivalry between us. It often felt like there was in the media because we got spoken about as a group so often. Hodgie I didn't really know pre-draft, and Luke Ball obviously knew really well because we both played at Sandy Dragons together. So we were mates going into the draft. And Hodgie and Bally were great mates because they'd been through the under, the junior system together. And then we all ended up being managed by the same guy in Paul Connors. So from our perspective, we were actually pretty happy with each other's success and got along really well. But certainly there was a lot made of it in the media, particularly in those early years. And I think for Hodgie, who was, battled some injuries early on in his career, I think, at times it was quite challenging for him. But certainly when we catch up now, it's great to see all those guys, and always good to catch up with them and have a chat or grab a beer.
What do you think it was about that draft specifically? Do you reckon it was, a lot of good guys coming through and being challenged by other prospects, or do you think it was a bit of getting time early in your career to develop, or were you just better than other people? Because you see now that, there are drafts that come through and the players probably don't excel to the point that recruiters think they will. Is that because of the team that they're in? Is it because of the leadership they get, or is it just simply down to their ability?
There's always a host of factors. And it's a bit of a mix. Like sometimes if you go to a really strong team, whilst in the long run you might be better off, in the short run it's often really hard to get opportunities and to grow because you don't have the opportunities that some other guys get. Likewise, if you go to a club that's right down the bottom and have a really underperforming culture, it's just hard to learn the lessons you need to develop as well. So these things are always multifaceted. There's a number of things that go into it, but you do look back at that draft and it was incredible. Some of the late picks as well. Sandy Lands was in there. Brian Lake, and obviously Bartel and Del Santo and Adler Jr. and the list goes on. So it really was a really strong year. And I don't know that there's a rhyme or reason for that. I think that's just how it panned out.
So at West Coast in 2002, John Worsfold took over the team the same year that you started, and that side became a powerhouse pretty quickly, gelled pretty quickly before 05-06 when you were contending for flags. What do you think were the main reasons why he was able to galvanise that group so quickly?
The players had a huge amount of respect for him. He's one of the most honest people I ever met. He's almost incapable of telling a lie, and that really builds trust. He was really unwavered by outside forces, and he's just he's a really tough guy as well, which when you're young male, that's a trait that generally guys will really aspire to be and look up to. So the combination of all those things, and also giving players, I guess the control over their own destiny. He didn't micromanage things, and he didn't micromanage his staff. So all those things sort of rolled into one, meant that he was just a super coach, and particularly for what that group needed at that time.
You talk about like honesty from coaches, I reckon shout out to our coach, Simon Williams, because that is his biggest trait. Like, he's just so brutally honest with everyone. And it just creates such an even keel across the group. The expectations are so clear. So I think it's an interesting point you raise about the role of the coaches can be so much more than just like playing. It's more just the relationships across the board of all the players and how they treat each other and that kind of side of it.
And I think too, there's a thing that's a little bit counterintuitive. You know, you see it in parents a lot. They want to keep their kids' self-esteem strong. So when their kid goes to them and there's something wrong, instead of the parent telling the kid the truth because they're worried that's going to cause anxiety in the kid or deflate their self-esteem, they'll lie to the kid. And the only thing that does is increase the kid's anxiety, because the kid, or in the case of a coach and player relationship, the player, they know that something's wrong. So if they're not getting an honest answer, they're still left flapping about trying to work out themselves what it is that's going wrong. So being honest and risking deflating somebody's self-esteem is actually a lot more self-assuring in the long run. And I think that was one of John's particular strengths.
That team had so many champion players in it. Ben Cousins was already there when you arrived. Cox, Kerr and Glass all came through about the same time as you. When did it dawn on you that those guys were going to be champion players as well and the team could become a premiership contender?
Probably not until 2005 when we, that end of that year, we were in a grand final. But we jumped so quickly. We'd finished sort of 8, and then the next year we were in a grand final. I think the learning was no one actually rings you up and announces you're a good team now. It just sort of, if you've been working hard enough for long enough, it just can happen. It doesn't necessarily have to. And that's really what happened there. We didn't know going into that year we were going to jump so rapidly. Because it was the only experience I'd had at AFL level, I didn't have a full appreciation of just how hard everyone was working. You come back to day one of pre-season and the vast majority of players would be running PBs on their B test. Not because the coach was there to watch, just because they wanted to improve. And just that culture around intrinsic motivation and blokes really pushing themselves when no one was watching was inbuilt, and had been inbuilt for a long period of time, not just with that group of players. It really felt like that was probably part of the fabric of the football club. Our physio at the time was John Annear, who was an ex-player for West Coast. And when he was a player, there were times where he got back to the airport after a game in Melbourne, wasn't happy with how he played, would give his bags to his wife who was there to pick him up, and he would run home. And it was a 15K run. So the club was sort of littered with these crazy sort of workaholic types. And that just permeated through the culture. And I sort of didn't realise that was the exception and not the rule at the time. But that was sort of a part of that club's success.
Yeah, Seb, I don't know if you know this, Chris, but Seb does a similar thing. When he goes and plays Big Bash interstate and he makes no runs, which is quite regularly, he actually gets me to pick him up and then he runs home from Tullamarine. So is that where you got it from?
I heard the stories of West Coast and what it did for them. So I trialled it, and ever since that, I don't think I've made a run since.
Geez, you've been fit though.
I've got a lot fitter. I'm not sure it's helped my cricket, but
Don't follow all the stories from West Coast you hear, Seb.
Well, hopefully not. We'll duck off that one very quickly. But just on those players that you played, we spoke to Dill Shear last week, and he talked about Richmond and how they sort of went away from a lot of what other teams do, and they just started coaching based on their players specifically. And then we dived into more of Dustin Martin and I guess how Kane Lambert tends to cover for him defensively, which allows Dust to do his stuff offensively. Was there anyone at West Coast that maybe played that role for you, or did you like to think that your two-way running was looked after itself?
No, there was some assistance, unfortunately. I'm starting with Dean Cox. Like, he is just, perhaps the greatest ruckman to have ever played AFL footy. If not the best in the discussion, which is huge. So to have someone like that put the ball down your throat at any stoppage you liked was a huge gift. But then the side was littered with people like, Rowan Jones, who would do a heap of defensive running for us, more attacking mids. Back then, a lot of players didn't tackle a whole heap, and it wasn't a big deal. Rowan Jones was a huge tackler and sort of bore the brunt of that load as well, which was useful. Tyson Stengline was sort of a tagging defensive mid, but would always be getting his body in places that would be useful to attacking mids like myself, and a whole host of others. So really, that whole team had different players in really well-defined roles that they wanted to play, and some were really celebrated by everyone, and I was lucky enough to be in one of those roles. But internally, there are a heap of guys that would be classed more as role players, but just did a brilliant job, both in what they did on the field, but in the way they carried themselves off it as well.
Yeah, and in that 05 year, you obviously lost the granny, but you got the norm, so it would have been such a weird feeling, that one. But such disappointment to lose that grand final. However, though, you did win the goal of the year, I believe, in that year. So they kind of would level out, wouldn't they? Goal of the year, losing like it's pretty good year overall still.
It was funny. The norm just didn't register at all in terms of joy on the day. Just because you're just so engrossed with how disappointed you are about losing granny. But what it did do, which was helpful afterwards, was you just didn't have any embarrassment about your own performance. And that happens, you're playing a really big game and you really want to win, or your teammates want to win, the coaches want to win. There's a lot riding on it for a lot of people. When you don't contribute in those games and you lose, you have the disappointment, which everyone has, but then you carry that embarrassment and that sort of shame that you're a real part of that. And if you play well, at least do your role in those big games, you avoid that shame and embarrassment, which is useful because it's uncomfortable dealing with that for a whole summer. So I didn't have to deal with that, but certainly dealt with the disappointment and heartache just as much as everyone else.
That rivalry with the Swans was absolutely incredible. And as most footy fans back then would remember, the games were always under a kick and the wins were split 50-50 just about. Sometimes the Eagles won, sometimes the Swans won, always close. What were some of your favourite things about being part of that rivalry other than actually winning the premiership in 06?
Oh, just how close the battles were and how much they asked of both teams were really special. And I guess finding out about teammates, there's this... I remember very little about the grand finals, but I just remember a few different contests that are just etched in my brain. And some of them probably don't feel that important, but just seeing, just seeing people you're really close to reach their full potential. And the reason they were able to reach their full potential is because they were put in such a challenge circumstance, and that was driven by the quality of the Swans. They were interesting sort of narratives at the time. The sort of narrative was that Sting had a Butler team, but they were just a great team, and West Coast were full of these elite players, but were just a team. And reality is, I don't know if that's entirely true, but both teams had great players, and both teams are really cohesive units and wanted to win.
In the sorry, Flan, you go.
I was going to say just one more on the 2006 grand final. I just really want to know, because I've got the opportunity to ask you here, ahead of that game, can you recall what the major key focus was heading into that particular game? Was most of it concentrating on what you, the Eagles, could control, or was there a fair bit of energy putting into nullifying the Swans?
Just a balanced amount of both, to be honest. I mean, one of the things that we did in that game was we put Raponda loose behind the ball for large periods of the game. It's something John Worsfold had refused to do. He was happy to play even 8 on 8 in our forward line or 9 on 9, which meant it was really messy in our forward line, but we were able to lock the ball in there for extended periods. And that playing Raponda loose back was something that some people have been suggesting we should do, but we hadn't tried it much at all, in small bit patches, but not as much as we did in that game. So that was a different tactic, if you like, and quite a courageous one to do it in such a big game from the coaching staff. But then, the focus for us was not too dissimilar to every other week. Just try and make sure we played our best. We didn't feel it was a game plan where we needed a lot of secrets. It was more around, it was fairly obvious what we were going to try and do, but it was going to be pretty hard to stop, and that's the way it panned out.
And then moving forward after those two grannies, obviously a highlight of your career was when you came back to Caulfield Grammar School in 2007, I believe. I remember we were all at school when that happened. I vividly remember just Dean Cox rolling around the Alf Mills, just being the biggest human ever. Like, he was just so big. And it was like Jesus coming back to Jerusalem or whatever. Like, what are your memories of that day? And like, was it weird just kind of strolling around where you used to go to school and be a normal school kid, and then now having just this mass following of students and teachers?
It was just, people go through it in their life. It's just interesting when one bit of your life ends and then another one sort of begins. And now, I mean, I find it strange. I had to do something on the MCG the other day. I was out on the ground, and it was just funny. Like, it feels like 30 years ago I was playing AFL footy. The phases of your life, they change and a new one opens up. So yeah, it was different because it was, being back in an old phase in a new context. But it was nice that connection to the school through obviously Greg Meredith and Barry Rawlings maintained, even post getting drafted.
And do you remember there was a bit going on that day, but we might have some uncovered some old footage of Flanas back in his school days, interviewing you and getting a photo with you. Pretty sure you wouldn't remember that.
How could I forget that?
There it is.
Look at that. That was a big thrill for me. Remember?
Yeah, you both aged beautifully, I must say.
We're actually talking about the start you had to that year, Brownlow-wise. You were firing. Like, it was 3 votes almost every game, and then body issues took over your groins. I remember when I was 16, 17, I used to go around telling everyone I had OP because I thought Juddy had it, and that was going to be good for me. And then it was strange when you'd be kicking torps after training, absolutely fine. But they used to warm up as I went on. But what was it like? How bad was your body, your groins, your shoulders? Did it really hold you back as much as everyone thinks, or was it something you were able to manage throughout your career?
Oh, my shoulders I was able to manage pretty well until the last probably 2 or 3 years of my career, where they were really challenging. But my groins post that that was a really significant injury. And all footy players get them at various stages. But yeah, that second half of the year, I was completely useless, and I probably never quite felt like I could move the same. After I could get back to a good level of movement, but certainly the period of my career post that OP was very different to the first half, and particularly just the way I had to monitor training loads and growing up as the kid that just wanted to train more. It was certainly a different mindset post OP because the body just wouldn't tolerate that much load.
Just on the shoulders, we heard that when you finally came up against West Coast, when you moved over to Carlton,
yes,
one of the West Coast players was getting into you and maybe making a point of your shoulders and asking you why they were so sore. And was it true you turned around and said they're sore because I've been carrying you blokes for the last 10 or so years, or is that just one of those little wives' tales you hear?
I think it's true.
There's some elements of truth to that. It does. It sounds obnoxious when you say it out loud, but in the heat of battle, these things can slip out from time to time.
Yeah, 100%. And then obviously the big move back home happened. That was pandemonium as well. I'm a Melbourne supporter, so I was kind of praying for the D's just to finally have some success. You brushed us off though, which was good of you. Talk to us about that time and like trying to come to a decision. And in those times, do you find like it's helpful to get heaps of ideas and thoughts from other people, or did you more just try and really analyse internally what you wanted to do? How did you approach that decision?
Just analyse internally, and I ended up actually having a list of different criteria and just sort of ticking it off. There things around clubs have to be able to spend a certain amount on their footy departments. Certain lessons I've been able to learn along the way that are really integral to on-field success. And then in the end, being able to play for Carlton, being able to play at a big Melbourne club was one of the main focuses. I grew up going to the MCG with the old man regularly, so to be able to play for a team that played against traditional rivals at the MCG was a big part of that. And people have said, would you have changed if you had your time over? And once you go to a club and a club like Carlton, footy clubs really does feel like it's part of your DNA. And I couldn't imagine being attached to a different Melbourne club. Would have been great to have won a flag. We didn't get there. But certainly being a part of that club has been hugely special for me, and still some wonderful memories from playing in those big games at the G.
And if, just so I can rest easy when I'm old, if Melbourne were to fly you into the Junction Oval on a helicopter, would that have changed any of your decision making, or that we were still out of the race?
It was just the difference of what you're spending on your footy department was a long way off what the other were, and I couldn't see that changing. So, anyway.
Yeah.
Chris, when you arrive at Carlton, you come in as a new player and as captain. And at that time, you've got a guy like Brendan Favola, who's a champion player, critical to the team's chances of success on field, but from some reports, a bit of a polarising character within that team environment. So I'm just wondering, as a captain that's just arrived to an already established playing group, what were some of the challenges that you had managing the players in that dynamic, not just Fev, but other large characters that had already been around at the club for a while before you arrived?
Well, I arrived at the club just as a player. There was no intent to become captain in that initial phase. And it was challenging because I wasn't training. So my groins was recovering from surgery. I did my first full training session a week before the last practice game. So, all those things were challenging. Being a captain at a club before you built up that personal equity with people was challenging. And I guess with Fev, I liked Fev and like him now. He had a great personality. He was a great talent on the football field. The idea was really to try and bring him inside the 10 and get him working on the direction of the team and having him a part of that process. There were times when that worked well and there were times when it didn't. And in the end, I think he was on his seventh last chance and he had a misdemeanor and that was that. But certainly I have great memories of playing with Fev and at times being a captain when guys like that are at club is challenging, but it's a fine balance between having some people in the competition that you can relate to, have a good sense of humour and do had that rogue element. And obviously when it becomes problematic or a distraction for the group, it's clearly it's gone too far. But when those types of players are working well, they can be huge for your group.
When you're at Carlton, there was a big game against Essendon in 2011, I think it was, the first final that you won. And then you went over and played at West Coast and got pretty close, but didn't get over the line. When you're playing with teams like that, do you know if you can go all the way? Having previously won a premiership with West Coast, did you look at Carlton and go, this team isn't good enough to go as far? Or do you always have that belief in the back of your mind with whatever team?
No, you don't. Well, I didn't know. No, I generally thought 2011, I even managed to convince myself in 2013 we were a chance to win it. And we were a long way off, obviously. But no, you don't know. When you're an athlete, part of the gig is lying to yourself. You sort of have to. Like, you'll have a small injury and you're lying to yourself that it'll be okay, and often it is. So you become pretty good at convincing yourself of, that there's hope where perhaps for people on the outside looking in there doesn't appear to be some. So I think that 2011 team was the best Carlton team I played in, and we finished 5th and, like you said, just lost that final to West Coast. And yeah, probably that Essendon game in the final and the 2013 final against Richmond were my most special memories in a Carlton jumper.
Before we tie up your footy stuff, just some general stuff in terms of like who would be the best player or the most talented player that you feel you've played with?
Look, I don't think I could split. The guys at West Coast from Kerr, Cox, Cousins, Glass. They all brought something really different, but all just incredible performers over such a long period of time. So I don't think I could split them. And then obviously at Carlton, I actually played with Paddy Cripps he was there I left in his second year, albeit he was still a baby, and me getting out of the team actually made life a lot easier for him. Him on a personal level. And he's
Are you claiming?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
But he's built into being a really special, he's an elite player of the competition too, albeit I didn't get him when he was at his best yet.
Imagine that. Cripps and Judd in the same midfield. That's tantalising.
Yin and yang, isn't it?
Yeah. And what about hardest player? Like, obviously there's your taggers and your really hard taggers, which probably aren't as much in vogue at the moment. But was there anyone that stood out that when you saw that, or the night before the game, you think, fuck, I've got to line up on them again?
I think Gotchy's the one. I speak about him a bit because we used to play on each other a lot. And when we did, it was really rare you'd play on another really high performing player. Usually the best mids in the competition at the time would be tagged. It was very unusual for two top-line mids to go head-to-head. So they were contests that really stood out to me. And he was just such an incredible athlete. 195, could play in the ruck, or could play as a ruck rover. Elite speed, really strong. So we had some great battles, particularly in the West Coast, Sydney games. So he's one I come back to as arguably the hardest matchup that I used to come across.
We've heard some good stories from BJ a couple of weeks ago about some on-field sledging, like the Lions through the early 2000 period. Is there a particular sledge that really resonated with you in terms of its wit, or was there anyone who could really produce some good ones?
I liked Luke Darcy on Coxie, and it was when they brought the rule in. You didn't used to have the small circle that the ruckman had to start in. Ruckman used to be, when I first got drafted, they could have as long a run-up as they wanted. And then rucks kept doing their PCL, so they brought in a little circle. And I remember Luke Darcy telling the umpires he's about to bounce the ball. Stop. Coxie's nose is out of the circle. And it was one I really liked. So a few good ones that used to come along the way.
In post-footy, the transition for players away from footy into society has been a huge focus for the AFL and the Players Association recently. And as people at the amateur level, we can relate to some degree going to see our mates 3 times a week and playing competitive sport on the weekend and then not having that structure. How did you approach that transition post-footy?
I don't know if I approached it in a really organised fashion. I think I was keen to really explore things that I wasn't able to do while I was playing footy that I was looking forward to do. So things like snowboarding was always at the top of my list. It's something I wanted to do and wasn't able to. So embrace those opportunities. I think I did make a conscious effort that I was going to have to be patient, which was really important. I think one of the things footy players like, which they maybe can't articulate that clearly, is they like being hyper competent at something, and that's a good feeling. And being high up in the social hierarchy is a good feeling, and you hear people like Jordan Peterson write about that a lot. But footballers get valued really highly throughout their community. You'll see an AFL player doing an interview, and you'll often hear his comments quoted if he's talking about politics or some other field where he has no particular expertise, and that's a sign where footballers sit in the social hierarchy, and as humans, it's natural that the higher up in the social hierarchy you are, the better you feel about yourself. So losing that is, I think, one of the things footballers battle with without really knowing what it is they're struggling with. And sort of what goes hand in glove with that is the fact that you retire, and if you leave the football industry, you're invariably going to an industry that you're not overly skilled at. So I was aware that was sort of happening. I took a role as an analyst in a venture capital fund post-football. And, it was a good opportunity to get, but I just understood I had so much catching up to do on other people my age, because I'd spent my days chasing around a footy. So just giving myself permission to be patient around that and accept that it was going to take a while before I was going to become good at something else was really important, because I think a lot of footy players just get frustrated that they're doing something now and not perhaps where they're not perhaps as good at it as they'd like to be.
What about your transition into the media, Juddy? Because Charlie and I were talking now, you got these personalities like, you got Corns, who's in there. He's a bit of an antagonist. He likes to work up the public. And that's sort of how he played as well. Like his tagging roles when he was at the AFL. And then you look at Richo, who was quite a hothead, used to go off, and now in the media, he's pretty calm, pretty relaxed. Was there anyone that spoke to you about your transition and what sort of personality you wanted to portray when you got into the media, or did you feel like you just went out there and you were just yourself from the go?
No, I think the main thing for me, my learnings in the media is just have to be yourself. That's what resonates with people, and not everybody will like you, but if you're yourself, well, that's all you can do, isn't it? And it takes a while to give yourself permission to do that, particularly when, well, not all players are like this, but I just had a view when I was playing footy that my job was to play footy. It wasn't to provide entertaining media content. So I was pretty focused on getting through whatever media I had to do, but really being clear on what my actual job was. Leaving footy, I just found it was probably too abrupt a stop. I went from thinking about footy constantly from the age of 15, and even really to a lesser extent from the age of 7 till the age of 32. And then overnight just completely stopped any contact I had with footy. And there was too much of a void in my mind around that. And it was too abrupt to stop. But I was clear I didn't want to work in football full time either. So being able to do some media stuff was brilliant for that. Just filled that void nicely, particularly doing some media like the Triple M stuff where it does really mimic the sort of locker room banter that was one of the bits that of footy that I really missed. So, yeah, I really enjoyed doing that. It's been good fun, good to have an involvement with footy, and to still, get to relive some of the glory days from time to time. Just have some of that banter that goes missing when you do stop playing organised sport.
Now, we did mention it just briefly before, but we'll touch on it again now. The CGFC podcast isn't the only podcast you've been appearing on recently. You've got your own show, the Talk Your Book podcast, where you interview some of Australia's brightest investors, and it's now in its second season. Can you now tell us a little bit about the show and what's happening on the latest episodes?
Yeah, thank you. I'm doing so Chris Judd Invest is the overall business, and there's two shows I'm currently doing. Talk Your Book, which like you said, is where an investor or a fund manager gets on and talks through their highest conviction investment idea. And then Masters of the Market is a show which is almost like a This Is Your Life style format of an investor or fund manager. So I love doing them. I'm investing in stocks for a living now, and just getting to mix with different fund managers, learn from their investment process, learn from some of their ideas, and fill out that network in the investment world has been really, really good fun for me, and something that I really enjoyed. So I plan on keeping them up for a while yet.
As amateur players, we don't get paid, but we do have a lot of guys and girls interested in the finance area. Have you got any hot tips for us or for any of the listeners over the next couple of months?
And may not get paid. There's a lot of contra deals going on in that amateur football. Yeah. I just think we need to scratch the surface a little bit there. The amount of heat I got over my Visi deal, I'd just like to see it put to these amateur job placements put to the test, to be honest.
That's all good.
I prefer other people giving the stock tips. But I have just got gold on the brain. So let me tell you, if the Aussie gold price drops, I'm going to come into family dinner one day and it's going to be incredibly frosty because the whole family realises how exposed we are to the Aussie gold price at the minute. So that's what I'm doing and that's what I'm sticking with. But there's plenty of people much smarter than me who can give your listeners advice.
Brilliant. That's good. We'll take that.
That's what we need. Yeah.
We only need
to invest in gold. Is what
invest in gold. Put it. You heard it here first. Juddy said do it. So there we go.
Field fans, that's the Talk Your Book podcast. So make sure you head to chrisjuddinvest.com to check it out. You can also stay updated on the Facebook page, Chris Judd Invest, or on Instagram at Chris Judd Invest. And just like this podcast, you can listen to Talk Your Book on Spotify and iTunes, or to watch it, you can go to the Chris Judd Invest channel on YouTube.
Beautiful. Thank you, gents. Appreciate it.
before we let you go, a couple of our viewers got together and they've started a GoFundMe page to try and get your kids to Caulfield Grammar. So we'll keep you in the loop with how that is progressing.
That's good.
But as from us in the Caulfield community, we're super grateful to have you on. You're giving us a lot more time than we previously agreed on. So we're really thankful for that. And once again, from everyone here, good luck with everything that's coming up, and get out to the kids and the wife, and hope everyone's doing really well.
Thanks very much, guys. And you owe Oscar a net session, Gotchy. So I'm not forgetting that.
Yep. I'll be down. I've been working on my short ball, so let him go to pretty done with.
You saved my shoulder. Beauty. Thanks, gents. Really appreciate it. It's good fun.
Thanks, Juddy. Good on you, mate.
See you guys.
This episode of the CGFC official podcast is brought to you by our sponsors, the Caulfield Grammarians Association, Cam Hammond Floors, Dorman Capital, Matias Group, ALH Group, ProBuild, Scholten Collins McKissock Wealth Management, Bendigo Bank East Malvern, Club Warehouse, Besser & Co., Grilled Elsternwick, Urban Alley Brewery, and the Royal Saxon Hotel.
Welcome back to the official CGFC podcast, guys. How good was that? Chris Judd on the program. Incredible insight from the great man.
I don't know about you, Seb, but I reckon I'm going to need to go for a walk or have a shower or just kind of decompress a bit because I'm a bit on edge. That was outstanding.
I can't believe not only is it one thing to give up your time, we've had Shield and BJ and Juddy, and they've given us a bit of time, but the manner in which they do it, and Neto, the manner in which they've been doing it, it's just such a joy for people to listen to. It doesn't seem like it's too much hassle for them to jump back into a little time machine and take a trip down memory lane. And I think what it's offering the community is huge. And personally, I'm just loving listening to these big names.
And he was so relaxed as well. Like as soon as off air, he said to us how to go at us for wearing tracksuits. Yeah. So he was obviously very well dressed.
Yeah, he looked great, didn't
he? Looked $1 million. Oh. But yeah, outstanding. And I hope our listeners enjoyed it.
Yeah, and just again, thanks so much to Chris for joining us today. It's been brilliant having him on the show, and speaking on behalf of everyone involved with Caulfield, we've all loved watching his magnificent footy career and got a lot of admiration for everything he's done and continues to do in life. So thanks again, Chris, for joining us, and keep kicking goals like always. As we always like to do on the program, we take a look at the weekly notables. What's happened around the club this week, fellas?
Not a huge amount around the club, Flan, but there is light at the end of the tunnel in terms of a return to train. Which is fantastic. Huge. It's great that we can now get together in groups of 10. I think the club, from a male's point of view, is organising times for players to advise coaching staff when they can train. So they're going to try and get a select group of 10 together who then continually train with each other through this period. So that's really exciting. It'd be great to see the guys and to get back into training.
I'll just add on that, Joe. Being a coach of the reserves, I'm in an email chain with a few important people at the club, and seeing the work that goes on behind the scenes and what they're trying to put into place to get players back is quite remarkable. I'm not going to put my hand up and say I've been doing anything, but just watching, there's been a few little seminars that people have had to sit down and attend. There's been some tests that they've had to go through. There's been some protocol that has to be updated on. So the work that the people behind the scenes do should never go unmentioned. So to those people who are keeping Caulfield tick along, well done. And a quick little skip off that topic. I've been watching TV, a lot of TV.
You have been?
A lot. I've been parked in front of the couch, an aggressive amount. I feel like Dan Gray on Sunday afternoon, real slob sort of
cannot move.
And what I've been seeing is a familiar face.
Really?
Yeah, real familiar face. And I think he may be on this podcast, and I think he's just sitting over there smoking. Run us through what's going on there, big fella.
Yeah. So Kinney Tonight is that's launching on Monday, 25th of May. This Monday coming up at 9:30 p.m. on Channel 10. Sketch comedy show in its second season. We had the first season last year and it went really well. Outrated footy classified, which we're really happy about, and we're hoping that it can do the same. Again,
had to slip that in.
Thought I'd slip it in, but yes, hopefully we can get that sort of viewership again. We're on straight after Have You Been Paying Attention? So hopefully everyone watches Have You Been Paying Attention, and then follows on and watches after us afterwards on Kinney Tonight.
And look out for the gorgeous looking male with the CGFC white visor on, because you're given the CGFC merch, a bit of a plug whilst on telly, which we are
Absolutely.
just stoked about.
And that merch is still available for anyone playing at home. There's some really good products going up on there. So get
Great
online.
plug. Get in contact with Joey McClellan's mother, who is running our merchandise stuff. So no better time to get merched up when you're in isolation, I reckon.
And here's a trailer of Kinney featuring that CGFC visor.
Can a wink change the meaning of a sentence?
Have you got your brother's home address?
I work late shift at the nursing home.
Geez, your dad's friendly.
Hey, do you want to go work on this spreadsheet together?
Well, you climb the ladder and I'll hold it.
Gee, these cucumbers feel nice and ripe.
Hey, can you tell me where the bathrooms are?
Yeah, so we're going to have a dinner party with a few other couples.
Troy Kinney is back with a brand new season.
My wife passed away last year.
New Kinney tonight, coming to Mondays on 10.
Geez, we are shameless here at the podcast. We've got Chris Judd on, but we're already promoting our own stuff. It's not very professional, but it's what we're all about.
Doesn't matter. Any opportunity is an opportunity, and we will take it with both hands.
Yeah.
Channel 10, 9:30, Monday. All right, before we finish things off, it's time for our favourite segment, Phone a Fieldsman. Take it away, Chaz.
Yes, thanks, Flanas. And we're going with Phone a Fields woman again this week. Seb and I were very disappointed last week that Chelsea Fisher didn't answer. So we're trying again. We're going none other than Amy Dumas, CGFC captain, I believe a couple of years ago. Could be wrong there. We do want to know how to say Amy Dumas' surname as well.
Well, this is partly why we're calling her out, just to figure out how to say the last name and ask her a few questions as well. But Charlie?
Yeah, so just for our listeners who haven't heard this fantastic segment before, if you guess 3 questions correctly, you get a free slab of the Field Centenary Lager, one of the best lagers going around. So here we go. Good luck to us.
She's got to answer. We need just one person to answer. Saturday night, a few drinks with the girls.
Yeah.
6, 1, 4,
goodness.
4.
Okay, so
That was so quick.
So for the listeners, I've just been hung up on within one ring.
Wow, you mustn't have taken your phone off private.
I'm gonna. That's not funny, Seb.
Sorry.
Okay, we'll go again. This is what happens on Phone a Fields person. Anything. Here we go. I'm nervous.
I'm nervous, yeah. I'm really nervous. It's not happening.
Oh, it's just not gonna answer.
We just have no luck with this segment. No luck. Week in, week out.
Yeah, it's just, we're cursed, mate.
Yeah.
We are cursed.
Well, what do we do next then?
Well, what we always do.
Usual protocol.
Usual protocol. We scroll down the contact list and we find the next fieldsman, who is in fact James Easton.
James Easton, that's a good one.
One of our good friends.
Yep.
We all know he'll be glued to his PlayStation, so there's
will.
no reason why he won't answer.
Wow. Will he be playing COD?
I think he will be. He's always on there.
All right. Come on, Easter.
Fingers crossed. Here we go. Come on.
Oh, dear
People
God.
don't trust the general public with no caller ID, I've established.
Hello?
Hello, is that Mr. Easton?
See, Logan.
Yeah, hello, James. It's also Seb Gotch and Tommy. Yeah, mate, because welcome to Phone a Fieldsman.
You're on the
official podcast, Ace. Nah, we're doing it. You are live.
The worst time you could have called me this entire week.
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
I'm doing everything. I'm doing. No, what do you mean? I'm doing nothing wrong.
No.
I'm doing everything legal. I'm following all the rule books.
That's terrific. Have you got time for 3 questions to win yourself a free slab of Centenary Lager?
I want to win free slab. I want to win free slab.
Okay, well, turn your brain on because 3 questions are coming at you. Question 1. What is your football nickname?
Besser.
Yeah, correct. Speedo. Would have also accepted Big East and Jimmy E.
Or Hazy.
Or Hazy. Second question. What is your favourite drink?
That's actually a hard question. Beer. Can I just
that's
we
correct.
got that. Yep.
okay,
Yep.
Would have also allowed vodka raspberries.
Yeah, would have taken vodka raspberries. 100%.
Question 3, and typically, James, this question is slightly harder, so really I want you focused in here.
Yeah, focus.
What country by area has the most tornadoes?
America.
No,
it's not America. I would have said America.
Yeah, I think that's a realistic answer, but unfortunately, James, you're wrong.
It was England.
See you later, big fella.
See you, boys.
Jeez, I was almost about to give him a second question there.
I don't think we
I
can,
felt
though.
bad,
We can't be pressured
we
from the
can't.
public into giving more questions because these beers aren't cheap.
I don't want to throw Pete Small under the bus, but he does not want to give away a slab. So
Absolutely
I think
not.
we should try and keep it as hard as possible. But that's it for another week of Phone a Fields Person. Shambolic as always. Flanas, we got there in the end.
They get better every week if they answer. If they answer, it's unreal.
The answer. That's the key, isn't it? Yeah, it's hard talking to no one.
It's okay. Yep.
All right, well, that's just about it. That's all we've got time for here on the CGFC podcast for another week. Thank you so much to Chris Judd for joining us on the show. What a wonderful guest, magnificent insight, and so giving of his time. And just can't thank him enough for appearing on the show. And make sure that you check out Chris Judd Invests and his podcasts as well on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube as well. And thanks to you, our listeners. Make sure you keep tuning in every week for more fields. You can start today on all the social channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Spotify, Whooshka, iTunes, YouTube, all of them. Make sure you subscribe. Thanks to Seb and Chaz as always. My name's Tommy Flanagan. We'll see you next week on the official CGFC podcast. Go Fields.
Carnival.
See you, gents.
Whether the odds be great or small, the Fields will go in and win overall. While her loyal sons are mine.